Everybody, welcome to the One More podcast. This is where we are just discussing how to think through living a life of mission. What does that look like for us, and hopefully give you some handles. I think when we talk about our own faith and our own lives, sometimes it's difficult to think through that. And I'm here as always with Peter. Peter, welcome to the podcast.
What's up, man? Good to see you.
Yeah.
Yeah, feeling pretty good, especially about my San Diego Padres today.
Yeah, if you're not watching this, if you're listening to this, Peter's definitely rocking out the San Diego Padres. Right now we are in the midst of the playoffs, so we record this a little early. So right now we actually don't know what's going to happen in this series because it's 1-0, right? No, it's 1-1. Wait, what's the series at? No,
Uh,
they just won. They swept,
yeah,
right?
it's
That's
Padres.
right.
Yeah, Padres won the
Okay,
series.
so
That's why I'm very
so
happy right now.
right. So if you're listening to this is we are a little early. So they just won the series, the first series, and now they're going into the division round.
Yeah, ready to fight the hated Dodgers.
That's right, the Dodgers. Ugh, the Dodgers. I don't know about the Dodgers, man. There's like one of those baseball teams. I feel now I grew up outside New York City, so I am a Yankees fan. I used to grew up going to Yankee Stadium. But I think Yankees are kind of in the same category where if you're not really a fan of that team, you just don't like them. It's
Yeah,
like the Dallas Cowboys are kind of similar. Like if you're a sports team, it's like the Cowboys, the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Lakers probably are
yep.
in that
Yeah,
category.
it's one of those teams where it's like if you're not if that's not your team, then when your team doesn't win, all you want is for that team to lose.
Yeah, you're just rooting against that team. It doesn't matter who it is. Like as long as that team loses, you're happy. That's kind of
Yes,
kind of the way it works. So I think we're collectively right now rooting for the Padres with you, man.
I like
Yeah.
it.
And if you didn't know it, Peter spent a lot of time out in Southern California. Yes, you were
Yep,
there.
yep. Raised out in San Diego. Yeah, Padres have
Yeah,
been my lifelong team.
and the San Diego Charge. Oh no,
Oh yes.
oh
Oh
that
yeah, that one
hurts.
that
Los
cuts
Angeles
deep.
Chargers.
That cuts deep. Man,
Sorry to bring it.
that
San
still
Diego.
hurts.
Are you old enough to remember the San Diego Clippers, or was that where they have they always been LA?
So I didn't watch the Clippers,
Yeah.
but I used to have a jacket of the San Diego Clippers just
Okay.
because I could rock it. But that was
Man, I don't
actually
know.
yeah, back in the days of Bill Walton even.
Yeah, I know. I'm assuming we're all kind of like this here in Arizona, but San Diego is kind of a gem in the country that nobody really knows about outside of the Southwest.
Yeah.
Um, I think even LA people are kind of like, move to San Diego. They don't really like it.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming San Diego people are like LA. It's a little bit
Yep.
like Tucson and Phoenix. You're like, oh, Tucson, what are we doing? But man, San Diego, I don't know if there's a nicer like city to just go visit when you're in Arizona to go to the beach. I
Yep.
mean, you got La Jolla, you got Coronado,
Yep.
um, even
Oceanside,
Oceanside. Yeah.
everything.
I mean, there's just a lot there. So, um, anyway, we're glad that you're in Phoenix now. But you were speaking of sports, and you were in AIA. You were telling me a story earlier about you were just talking about sharing faith and what does it look like to reach out. And I think we've all had weird stories about doing that.
Yeah.
You were telling me a story earlier. Why don't you just share with everybody the story about a buddy of yours who was trying to share the gospel or at least connect with somebody that he knew from I think it was AIA, right? Or
Yeah,
like
yeah.
sports
So
team.
basically, like, we're on this podcast, we're talking about, sharing our faith. So I have stories that always come to my head about like awkward situations. And one story that always keeps coming back to me is a buddy of mine who was, working with a football team at a school, kind of like a chaplain. He wanted to introduce himself to one of the coaches on the team, a strength and conditioning coach, and he knew that this coach had worked with someone that he knew, like another coach previously. And so I think in his head, he's like, okay, I'm going to ask him if he knows, like, hey, do you know this guy? That'd be his opener. So he walks up to him, and this is a strength and conditioning coach. He's big and roughly and kind of to himself. And he says, "Hey, like, my name is whatever. Hey, do you know this guy? I think you like worked with him in the past." And the guy just kind of looked at him, and the first thing he says is, "Are you the Jesus guy?" And
Not
my
not
friend who's
never
like,
sounds like that's never a good like, oh,
"Oh,
yeah.
this is
That's
encouraging.
like
This will go
yeah,
well."
like a condescending question.
Oh man. And so he knows he's kind of like a chaplain there. So he's like, yeah, like I'm the guy. And then the guy looks away from my friend and says, well, why don't you ask him? And then walks away.
Yeah.
And it's just an
Oh,
automatic closed door, shut down, and I'm gonna mock you while I'm walking out kind of a thing. And I just think about that story so many times. I'm just like, yeah, I've been shot down before, but I haven't been shot down like that before.
yeah, it's like a glorious shooting. I wonder if a lot of us, as we even think about it, have two thoughts to something like that. One, is we all maybe have some sort of not maybe not a story just like that, but if we've tried to, interact with others, like there's been something where you feel like you've been shot down, or at least just ignored, and it just did not go anywhere.
Yeah,
And two, I wonder if that's the thing that we're the most afraid of, is just the awkwardness of like, oh boy, that didn't go well. And now I gotta somehow work with this guy. And what do I say? And I'm kind of offended and kind of mad, but I'm also, I want him to know who Jesus is, and I want him to
yeah,
get understand what my faith is. And so I got to be careful. Like, I wonder if that just kind of plays in a little bit, into how we think about even sharing our faith, or some of the fears that come into it. I'm assuming it does. That kind of, as you just said, you think about that story a lot. Is that because you have similar fears, or you're like, is this going to be that kind of story for me, or how do you think about that story?
absolutely. Yeah, I think especially if it's a conversation with someone maybe I don't know, and maybe we're getting to know each other, and then the conversation starts heading towards religion, or maybe a chance to share my faith background or church experience, whatever. Um, yeah, like it's almost like I have a little guard up because I know that they could come at me with, "Oh, I've had a horrible experience with church and I don't want anything to do with it. Why are you bringing this up to me?" Like it's almost like it's not true, but it's that idea of I'm gonna make this person feel bad and it'll be my fault. And so it gives me like reservation, or at least just like a battle in my head of like, should I do this?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering if if as you're listening to this, if you can relate to that, because I think that that's just it's a very common fear, common thought for us, and we just rather, in some ways, not deal with it. It's just easier to ignore. I don't even want to put myself in that situation, so I'm not gonna engage this. It's like sometimes with my kids, as they've gotten older, sometimes I'm like, okay, um, I'm gonna have you go pay the bill, or I'm gonna have you talk to the waitress about,
Yeah.
or the waiter about what your order is on your own, or I'm gonna have you. Why don't you call the doctor and you to set up your own appointment? And the question is always like, I don't know what to do. It's like a fear. Like, I don't know what to say. I actually just watched this really, I was watching it was like Instagram or something, Instagram reel. And it was a like a family sitting around like at a restaurant. And the caption was, Matthew, whoever it was, ordering his own food for the first time. This kid's probably a teenager, he's trying to order
Yeah.
his food. And he says, I'll do the eggs with pancakes, please. And she goes, how do you want your eggs? And he goes, he kind of looks panicked, looks at his parents. He looks panicked. He goes, hatched. I want them hatched. And the waitress is like, scrambled. He goes, oh yeah, scrambled. And you hear the dad laugh, and the dad's like, did you say hatched? He goes, no, no, I didn't say hatched. I feel like sometimes maybe we get into that situation where we just get so nervous about how do I answer the question that they're going to ask me, because I just don't know enough. I don't have enough information.
Mm,
And it got me thinking about it. And even as we've talked, Peter, about how to help on this podcast, just think through sharing our faith. If we can broaden our own stories, like we've talked here about, hey, our testimony matters because we've experienced something here
yeah.
that we want to share with others. I wonder if it just even broadening the category from specific to general is helpful. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think the idea of it can sometimes get in the way that I'm like, like no one really wants to hear like the specific things that I, wrestle with on a day to day because, maybe they're going through different things. And it's just like, well, my story is a different story. And it's like maybe they'll receive it as like, hey, that's cool. Like, anyway, I gotta deal with my mess. So thanks for sharing, your God with me, but I got something else to deal with.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder if then we either panic that way or maybe they even worse, maybe they start asking us really specific questions.
Yep.
I wonder it would be helpful just in these next couple minutes here to give some broader categories for us to think through
Yeah.
as we're thinking about sharing our faith. The first one would be instead of talking real specifically about like real specific, sometimes we can go like, you know, well, Romans says,
Yeah.
um, or Ephesians says, which isn't wrong. That's okay to do, but you're getting yourself into some discussions at that point, perhaps, where people start to go, well, I don't even believe the Bible is true. And then you're having to defend, you're not talking about the gospel anymore or the story of Jesus. You're just talking about, I gotta have proofs as to why I believe the Bible's true. We start hitting like, well, you should read the case for Christ, or you should,
Yeah.
there's this. I wonder if we just hit broader categories when we talk about our faith and we talk about what Jesus did for us. Like in our brains, just remember that everybody in the world is dealing with brokenness somewhere.
Yep.
And really, what they're looking for is healing or wholeness.
Mm.
So, like in your life, when you think about your life, if you were to share something like that, like from brokenness to wholeness, what would that look like? Like if someone, like if you're sharing the faith with somebody and you're just trying to think through, okay, how do I just hit the fact that everyone's broken and we need healing or wholeness? What would that look like for you if you could do it in like a minute?
Yeah. This is a fun conversation, I think, because I think a lot of us don't take the time to really go back through our story, our life story, and to think about, what are some of the common themes in my life that have really shaped, how I've gotten to where I am today. So like when I think about my life, I'm someone who grew up in the church. You know, so I've always been around, faith and religion and the Bible and God conversations. So maybe on the surface that can come off as like, oh yeah, I've always kind of had this, you know, solid foundation, right? Like that could come off that way. But if you were to like maybe dig a little deeper, I was to let you behind the curtain a little bit more, you would see, a kid that grew up with insecurities, that grew up with this sense of, man, I want people to see me a certain way. And that would lead to certain actions in my life and decisions in my life and avoiding certain things in my life to where all of a sudden I was, even though I was a kid, if I could like almost as a psychiatrist, like observe the realities of my life and my heart, like I was someone that was almost like a slave to what other people thought. And I was trapped and I couldn't get out of that. I didn't have the power to get myself out of that. So as you talk about that idea of like everybody's broken, um, maybe on the surface it would seem like my life wasn't broken, but underneath, like I could see the cracks. Like I know the cracks were there. Because like I said, like other people's opinions of me was the most important thing. And if you've ever been like that, you know that like other people's opinions come and go, change with the wind. And I feel like I'm just like looking for some affirmation from somebody somewhere at all times.
Mhm. Yeah, that's good. And I think that as you think about that with people, with anybody, I'm going to talk about all of us. So you included, you're the host of this, and your friends that are Christians and your friends that aren't. I think everybody's got something in their life that feels broken. It could be it could be a family. It could be a
Mm.
family of origin. It could be like what you just said, like some inner monologue, dialogue stuff where we're just second guessing ourselves, or we're so wanting someone's approval. It could be, it could be alcohol. It could be sex. It could be lots of different things where we're just confused, broken, and in need of healing. I don't think we need to go in. I mean, you could, I guess, but I'm not sure you need to go out there and say like and this is called sin and Romans says I think we just know that like we
Yeah,
we know that as Christians we go look sin is pervasive and
yeah,
so what people really need is to be healed from that because that's what creates the brokenness. The world was broken in Genesis 1 and I'm sorry in Genesis 3 after Genesis 1 and 2 and
yep,
so that brokenness is only healed in Jesus. It's only healed in Jesus. And we have the answer to that brokenness. And so if we can see it that way, instead of like, let me give all the proof texts, I just even thinking like, and brokenness is something that we have an answer for, and we should be able to share that without apology.
Yeah.
Like we were talking yesterday. Peter and I had lunch yesterday. We were talking. He's preaching in a couple weeks, and we were just talking about it. But if you see somebody with a broken arm on the side of the road, and you're like, hey, I can take you to the doctor, because that they can heal that, but you kind of think to yourself, that's embarrassing. Um, I don't know. Like maybe I just leave him there. I'm not even going to say anything to him. It just seems like it's just, I don't even know how to start the conversation. I don't even know what to say. We would never do that. We'd be like, hey, this person needs something. I can provide it for them. Why don't I do that? I see something broken. Let's make sure that that gets healed, or at least I offer. They might
Yeah.
say no, but at least I offer it. And I think if we can think about sharing our faith with people as simply as just going, hey, I think that we have some information. I know that we have some information that they need to hear and that they need that will heal some brokenness. Maybe it'll give us a little bit more confidence.
Yeah. It's so easy to, yeah, just kind of get caught up, like you said, like almost an internal dialogue of, man, like I want this to go correctly. I have this picture in my head of what the end result should look like. I don't want this person to hate me. Uh, but I think, like you said, like that, like we're focusing on all the things that don't matter in that situation with that person. Because the truth is, like their brokenness right now is leading them to death. Like their brokenness is leading them to hell. And I think that's maybe even a conversation that is like scary for us when it comes to, you know, as Christians and sharing our faith. Like there is a stark reality that we all have to accept, where it's either this person will believe in Jesus and have eternal life with him and know his love, or they won't. Like there's no either or in this process. There's no, oh, I'll get to it in this process. This is, oh no, like this life is the only opportunity we have. Now, maybe this person is someone who will hear the gospel multiple times and have multiple opportunities. Um, but at the same time, like, what am I responsible for is for that interaction. And I want to make sure in that interaction that I have with that person that they know that they are loved, that they know that the brokenness they're experiencing does not have to be their eternity. It does not have to be the one thing in their life that defines their life. Jesus can define their life. Um, so yeah, it like it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be smooth, and it may not. You may not even have a complete explanation to somebody, because life is life and life is crazy, and sometimes people don't want to hear it. Sometimes they are just like, hey, talk to him about it, kind of people. Um, but I'm not responsible for that. I'm not responsible for how they react. I'm responsible to deliver the message.
Paul says in First Corinthians, that there aren't many wise among us and there aren't many noble among us. And I think that we should take that to heart. I don't think
Yeah,
Paul's like, hey, there's a bunch of people wise. We don't have the most. Paul would say him for himself, like he tried really hard to to preach the gospel as simply as possible. I think he was very eloquent, but it wasn't. I think he also recognized that how he said it.
yeah,
He wanted to be intentional, but really the onus of the saving work wasn't on how well he said something. It was on the spirit that was at work. And so he wanted to be faithful. And so that's why we're doing this podcast. We want to try and have you be faithful. But at the same time, you might give the worst sharing of your faith in the history of sharing of your faith. It could be the absolute bumbliest stumbling over. You might feel like you're an idiot. Um, and that might be the conversation where somebody responds. You don't know. I think it takes, 7 times for people to hear the gospel before they do something.
yeah,
You might be the first person to share it with someone or the seventh, who knows? I don't know, but I think that we just kind of we want to make sure that we're being faithful with it. Um, and maybe just that idea of brokenness to wholeness would help you. The other one we've used this in the series too would be like death to life.
Yep.
You know, if we have something dead, like if we're dead and spiritually, then there's life to be had, and we have the answer for that too. I wonder. Last thing we'll say, and I should get your thoughts on this. I actually wonder if we don't do more of that, even as you were talking about, when we think about just sharing our faith with people that need to hear it, and how are we processing it? Maybe it's just that in those moments, practically, we actually don't believe that hell exists, or we don't. I think theologically we do because we've.
Hmm.
But if there's no urgency, um, then maybe it's just maybe it's just a problem with us as what we're thinking, how we're thinking about it. That
Yeah.
we're actually like eternity is so far away and it's so hard to grasp that we just kind of mail it in and go, I'm just having to think about this. This is too much. And then it just leads us to complacency.
Yeah. Yeah. When you talk about that, like I just think about the parable of talents. It's really just a story where a master gives his, workers, three different workers, he gives them, talents, each according to their, gifts and skill sets and what they can handle. Um, but what I love about the story is that he gives it to them so that they could work and use them the best they can. And then it says he left and that he didn't tell them when they would come when he would come back. And then eventually it says, and then he came. And that's always for me a story that reminds me that, man, like God is real, hell is real, and that we have an opportunity to point people to Jesus with our lives, but there will be a time when we won't. Like there will reach a moment when we will no longer have an opportunity, and Christ will come back for his church and establish a new heaven on earth. But there will be people who are separated because they have not believed and they have some have not even heard. And so it's very much a an urgency. I think that sometimes as Christians we maybe just dumbing down a little bit, like quieting in our hearts a little bit because it's like, oh, we'll get to it. Um, but no, like Christ can come back any day, any moment. Um, and he is asking us to partner with him in rescuing all of his creation, to share the good news, to share the gospel, to share our faith with anybody and everybody, invite people into a relationship with him, give people an opportunity to respond to it, to say yes, to say no. And I think sometimes we're just kind of on the bench and we're saying like other people can do that, better people could do that. Um, it's like no, like I want to shake us sometimes and say like no, you're the one that God wants to use.
Yeah.
Do you trust him?
Hmm. Yeah, because other people could do it. Other people are doing it. Maybe better people could do it. I mean, I think about myself, better, I'm sure more eloquent people could do it. But what would it look like for us if we all did it? Like, what would it
Yeah,
look like for us if all of us just said, "Hey, I'm just going to take this call seriously." And instead of having 10 people in the church or whatever it is, you know, being really faithful to share their faith, we had 150 people in the
yeah,
church that were faithful to share their faith. I mean, just think about what would God do? And that includes you as you're listening to this. I think that we just want to make sure that we're faithfully going out and telling people the good news. And because honestly, that's what the Bible says, and we believe it. And
amen.
we want to make sure that we do it well. So, all right, hopefully this is helpful for you. We'll continue to provide content like this. Re-listen to this if it was helpful. We talk about big categories. Otherwise, looking forward to seeing you on Sunday and continuing conversations like these as we jump into it. Peter, thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man. Go Padres. And yeah, good stuff.
We're all rooting for them. Beat the Dodgers. Let's see everybody.